Yo, welcome to Magikarp's YouTube channel. Today, normally Tuesday would have been a Players' Cup date, but instead I want to talk about this deck that I got second place with in Azul sub tournament. It was an over 50-person tournament, so it was a pretty large tournament, and the deck was a lot of fun. I just recently had the video on how to avoid burnout, and I mentioned one of the things is currently like you don't have to play in every tournament or anything like that, and I have been not playing in a lot of tournaments, but I normally play in Azul sub tournaments. And in this one, ADP was banned. So I kind of decided, like, okay, let's bring a more fun deck, something that's a little interesting. And the deck I brought was Donphan Spiritomb. It does not beat ADP. Like, yeah, you can maybe pull out 1 out of 10 games at best, but it's not really for one of those formats where you expect a lot of ADP. It is a very, very, very fun deck. So I'm going to do a quick little deck profile on it. I'm going to talk you through why some of the cards are in the deck, as well as a couple of the matchups. And I highly suggest anyone give this deck a try, just because it's very unique, it's very fun, it's very like thoughtful. Every single move matters a whole lot. And so one of the namesakes of the deck is this Donphan that just recently came out in Vivid Voltage. It has 150 HP, which is a big deal. We'll talk about why in a second. And for a single energy, does 120 damage and does 20 damage to each of our benched Pokemon. Normally a bad thing, but in this deck, a very good thing. So 120 for 1 energy, and it's a fighting type. That's a big deal. This deck is actually not very good, but Pikarom and Eternatus are everywhere. So that makes this deck quite good. 120 is also a relevant number. KO something like a Baby Blown. It easily KO something like a Whimsicott. You know, a lot of single prizers just get bopped by Don. The reason putting damage on the bench is I think Spiritomb is actually one of my favorite cards that has ever been printed. I've been playing it since Unbroken Bonds. I put one of in a Zapdos deck when it first came out, and it's just so much fun. So the attack Anguish Cry does 30 more damage for each damage counter on it, and it's 10 plus. So it can do 160, but we play 4 Capes of Toughness, give it an extra 50 HP, which means we can actually do 310 damage, which is very, very, very important. 310 knocks out every single tag team and lets you hit numbers that let you 2-shot any VMAX. So Spiritomb is kind of our main late game attacker. Donphan is our main early game attacker. What we want to do is we want to set up a Donphan by like turn 2, and we want to start doing earthquakes. We normally do 1 or 2. You want to be careful, because if you put too much damage on your bench, you will knock out your own Pokemon. It does happen occasionally, so you do have to be careful. Sometimes you want to attack and you're just like, well, I don't have a switch to get my Donphan out of the active and I can't Earthquake again, so I have to pass. And that's totally fine. But this is the general strategy of the deck. We want to set up a Donphan turn 2, probably Earthquake once. If we're lucky enough, we can Earthquake twice. And one of the reasons I mentioned the 150 HP is such a big deal is I play 3 Stone Energies. Stone Energy, we take 20 less damage, and this is incredibly relevant for some pieces of math, including Full Blitz from Pikarom, including Centiskorch. It requires Centiskorch to have an extra energy because now we go over that 160 HP mark. It also prevents something like Raichu's Tandem Shock. It requires even more benched Pokemon, or 1 more benched Pokemon by Eternatus, which they can normally get, but it's still a nice little like, well, do you have it? You know, we want to be asking the questions, not answering the questions. And Stone Energy is a card that helps us to do that. So we go Donphan early. We go in Spiritomb's late, and Spiritomb can hit really, really, really hard. A couple of the tech Pokemon, we play Jynx with Ominous Posture. We can move 1 damage counter from one Pokemon to another. It's incredibly good for powering up our Spiritombs. It's also quite good to play around something like a Mew using Psi Power to KO our benched Pokemon. So that's something that we have to be careful of, or we can kind of fix the math on some of our benched Pokemon. For example, if we have to bench a Crobat and use an Earthquake, suddenly now Cramorant can Snipe Shot it. So Jynx can move the damage counter off of the Crobat to make it harder for something like Baby Blowns or Tempozard to actually KO that Crobat. So Jynx being able to move damage counters mostly to power up the Spiritomb, but also to manipulate kind of where our damage counters are to make stuff harder to knock out. We have the Mew for bench barrier. It's really there for Tag Bolt. It's also there for Cramorant. Yeah, you don't want them to pick off your Spiritombs. It's a very big deal. One card I'm playing that I haven't seen in other lists is the Heal Jamming Mimikyu. Your opponent's bench Pokemon can't be healed. And a ruling that is super important for this is Malolana. Malolana technically heals from the bench. So it switches and then heals. It doesn't heal, then switch. So Mimikyu stops Malolana, which I thought was incredibly valuable against Colossal. Against, in a no ADP format, Centiskorch should definitely play Malolana, and against Luke Metal. And unfortunately, I did lose to Luke Metal in the finals. It's a very tough matchup, as I'll talk about. But I think the heal jamming Mimikyu gives you a shot in all of those matchups that otherwise you would lose to a single Malolana. Because you hit for 120, they go heal, knockout, and then you're just like, oh, this is bad. Like, now I have to deal with this massive Pokemon. So the heal jamming Mimikyu, I think, is incredibly valuable for those 3 decks, which all should be in high numbers in an ADP banned format. Support Pokemon, Crobat Dedenne and Oricorio. I would not change these. Like, a question that people might have is, how can I make this a budget deck? I mean, you could technically cut a Crobat for a second Dedenne and probably be 100% fine. Like, that is a cut that I'd be totally okay with. But otherwise, you definitely want 2 quick ballable consistency Pokemon. And Oricorio is just incredibly good for any single prize deck out there. Oricorio is just a very, very good Pokemon. So I'd keep these. I've seen some lists floating around with Eldegoss, and one of the reasons that I don't like Eldegoss in this deck is you just don't really have bench space, and you don't really have situations where you want to put down a 2-prizer to get back a supporter card. Like, there's nothing that really has come up with this deck. 4 Great Ball, 2 Great Catcher. This is a very big deal too. We pick off Dedennes. That is what our deck does. If our opponent ever benches a Dedenne, we go, cool, Great Catcher, Earthquake. Earthquake knocks it out, 120 plus weakness. That's another big value of the fighting type. We had Pikarom for weakness. We had Eternus for weakness. We also hit Dedennes and Crobats for weakness. So it's a very, very free 2 prizes. So that's why we play the 2 Great Catchers. If our opponents ever bench a Dedenne, and most of them will, that's how this format goes, then we could just pick it off. We're good to go. Playing Ordinary Rod, I've seen some lists playing a Nanu. The reason I like Ordinary Rod is we can get back 2 Pokemon, which is usually going to be like a support Pokemon. So you don't want to put your 2 prizers down. That's another big deal with this deck. We don't want to put 2 prizers down. And so very often we'll play Research, get rid of a Dedenne, a Crobat, and Oricorio early. We want to get that back. We probably also want to get back like a Spiritomb or a Donphan, or, you know, maybe a heal jamming Mimikyu because our opponent knocked it out, or something like that. So I like Rod to get back the 2 Pokemon. We also play basic Dark Energies, specifically because we play the Rod. If you wanted to cut the Rod, these would become Hiding Energies. But I like the Rod. It gets back the Dark Energies. It gets back 2 Pokemon, which is normally, like I said, an attacker and a support Pokemon. And you may be saying, why are you playing Stone Energies if you play Rod? The reason is the math from Stone Energy is very relevant. The extra 20 damage helps in some very, very popular matchups. The other reason is Donphan is early game. Occasionally you do swing with Donphan late because you can go like, okay, I'm going to just go attach, boss, KO a support Pokemon. But by that point, you kind of win the game. You don't really need to put back any of the 7 energies for Donphan, but the 3 energies for Spiritomb can be a big deal. It also helps, you know, early game, you have an Aurora Energy in hand and a Dark Energy. You can be like, well, I can always get the Dark Energy back. So I can go ahead and attach the Aurora to my Donphan. I can just discard the Dark for free because I know that Rod's in deck and I can always put it right back. So it's very nice there. So the Stone Energy, the 20 damage does matter. I would keep it over basic fighting energies. You don't really run out of energies for Donphan because Donphan, you attack turn 2, turn 3, and maybe 1 to finish the game. But in reality, late game, you're usually going 2. What else have we done? Quick Ball Switch, big fat duh. One difference from the list I played in the tournament to the list that I have now is I cut the 1 of Pokemon Communication for a 3rd boss's orders. I think had I played a 3rd boss, some of my wins would have been bigger wins, which is cool. There's a lot of me having to outplay my opponents, which kind of sucks. Like this deck, like I said, it's not that good, but it's good enough and very fun. But a 3rd boss means I would have had to outplay my opponents much less often than I did. Another thing that I like the 3rd boss for is a deck like Luke Metal. I never played the Luke Metal matchup. I honestly barely played this deck before the tournament. I played like 2 games on ladder. The Luke Metal matchup is hard because they shove a doll in the active. And then you kind of have to be careful of like, well, I can go attack, but then they get to knock me out and I don't have damage on them. So being able to boss it up with a heal jamming Mimikyu on the bench is very, very, very valuable because we can't Great Catcher in that matchup. 4-4, big fat duh. 1 of Air Balloon. I think 1 is fine. People rarely play Tool Scrapper, and if they do, they want to target your cape, not your balloon. So this just kind of keeps an infinite pivot. Throw it on like a Jynx or something like that, and no one's going to target a Jynx. No one's going to boss up a Jynx. And if they do, then you probably just win the game. Or you lose because you're in such a bad spot. 4 capes. Cape is like the best tool card in the game right now. Like cape in this deck is just ridiculously powerful. If this deck were like better and more meta, people would be running Tool Scrapper to beat this. So cape, we put it on almost always our Spiritombs. You could also throw it on a Jynx or a Mew. Like if you have to research it away, it makes more sense to throw a cape on like one of these Pokemon than not. But we can throw the cape on our tomb, give it 110 HP. We can hit for up to 310. Incredibly important. You do have to be very, very, very careful in some matchups. So for example, I played Luke Metal in the finals. Luke Metal usually plays Scrapper. My opponent did. So we had to be very careful about our placement of the capes, our placement of our damage counters, because we couldn't let Tool Scrapper give them 1, 2, 3 free prizes. Like that would be way too aggressive. I guess 3 is not actually possible, but you get the idea. We had to be very careful with our placement of capes in that matchup. Normally, if you're up against something like a Pikarom, and well, Eternatus, you have to be careful too. They play drills and stuff like that. So in those matchups, Eternatus, Luke Metal, occasionally ADP, you do have to be pretty careful of where you put your capes. A cape is a ridiculously powerful card, being able to power up the Spiritombs and let it hit for OHKO numbers. And for Auroras, just because we attack with 2 different energies, we have to have something. So some of the matchups for this deck, I'll very quickly run through them. The first one is probably the most popular that you will run into would be Eternatus. Eternatus is all over the place in no ADP formats because it's a versatility. It has single prize attackers, it has 2 prize attackers, or 3 prize attackers that hit really hard. But that matchup, we typically want to go in with Donphan. Like I said, that's going to be the theme always, and hopefully hit very hard. The thing that we have to be careful of is we can hit their VMAX with Donphan. They almost always go in with the VMAX, which, I mean, makes sense. They go in with the VMAX. We can hit it for 240. We can clean it up with the Spiritomb. But then we have to be very careful because if they play their own Spiritombs or their Hoopas, they'll usually clean up our Spiritombs with those Pokemon. So in that matchup, we want to go Donphan early, but we also want to have a Donphan with a clean Donphan with a Stone Energy for the late game. If our opponent is smart in the Eternatus matchup, they will KO our Tombs with their baby Pokemon. And then we have to shove a Donphan with a Stone Energy to give it 170 HP to say, all right, your Spiritombs, your Hoopas can't knock this out. You have to bring up another VMAX. And that's where we can pick off that VMAX for the last 3 prizes. Or, depending how the game's going, we can go KO VMAX, KO their Spiritomb or Hoopa, and then boss up a Crobat. And the reason Donphan's so good is that we can always OHKO a Crobat with our Donphan. So you have a couple ways to go about the game, but you almost always go Donphan, hit a VMAX for 240, Spiritomb, clean it up for 100 damage, which is 3 damage counters on it. And then depending what they do, if they come up with their VMAX, we want another Donphan ready to go. If they come up with a Spiritomb, then we can always go KO it, set up our Donphan on the bench to KO a bat with a boss's orders. It's a very, very favored matchup. Not an auto win. You have to be careful of their dangerous drills or tool scrappers, whatever. But it's a very good matchup. Pikarom, I actually think is an auto win. It's almost an auto win. Like obviously you can dead draw, stamp, hurts, stuff like that, but it's an incredibly good matchup. You KO their Bolton with Donphan, do some damage. They come up and full blitz you with their Mewtwo, doesn't KO your Donphan. You can hit it, and by that point you have so much damage on the bench that you can just pick off the rest of the game with Spiritomb. You just go hit with Tomb, hit with Tomb, hit with Tomb, game over. So Pikarom's an incredibly good matchup because we can KO that Bolton for a single energy, and they can't KO us in return unless they hammer the Stone Energy. At which point, we can still trade 2 shots with the Mewtwo. It becomes a little harder. But pretty much the only way you're going to lose that game is benching multiple 2-prizers and not getting Mew down, because then you're weirdly bench locked. You can get tag bolted for multiple prizes. So you have to be careful. But essentially, if you KO the Bolton turn 2 with your Earthquake, you just win the game. What other matchup? Centiskorch. Centiskorch plays out like most of the rest, although you probably want to get down to your heel jamming Mimikyu. So you can KO their Volk with Donphan. That's cool. They will come up If they got the Flare Starter, they will probably get a KO on your Donphan. That's not a big deal. We'll usually actually want to follow up with a second Donphan. So we go Donphan, KO Volk, they KO us. We hit them with Donphan, and that's going to put so much damage on the field between the two Earthquakes that we're able to finish it off with a Spiritomb hitting for well over 200 damage. We've taken 4 prizes, and we have Tombs on the bench that are ready to hit very hard, which is important because they will play stand. If they play Wondrous Labyrinth, I think we just lose. A card to consider in this deck, very, very strongly consider, is a Chaotic Swell. Chaotic Swell would prevent Wondrous Labyrinth from showing up. Wondrous Labyrinth is a good card in a no ADP format. Centiskorch should be running it. Colossal should be running it. Potentially other decks could run it. Pikarom could run it. So that's a card you might want to consider as the meta changes. Cut something for a Chaotic Swell. I'm not sure what, but you can cut something. Other big matchup, Luke Metal. Luke Metal is incredibly difficult. You just kind of want to hit very, very, very hard. You want to have heal jamming Mimikyu, and you kind of want to hope for the best. That's how Luke Metal is going to go. If you want to make Luke Metal better, I would test a Tool Scrapper in the deck. In theory, Tool Scrapper helps because that's a plus 30 damage, which is a humongous amount of damage. Difference between Zacian having 280 HP and 250 HP is very often the difference between you KOing it or not. Like, I could constantly in the finals say I could boss hit for, 30 damage short, essentially. Like, I know it doesn't actually have 280 HP, blah, blah, blah. But like, yeah, I was always about 30 damage short. The reason Tool Scrapper might not be the best card is because we play 4 Research into Dedenne, and it's like, will you have it in hand when you need it? But that's definitely something you can test out for the Luke Metal matchup. Another big hint, I probably should have put this in the beginning of the video, but there's a reward for those of you that are still here. Go second with this deck. This deck wants to go second every single game. You have to set up. One of the best things you can do turn 1 is you get down 1 Phanpy for sure. If you have a Phanpy in the active, you probably want to put one on the bench if you're playing a deck that knocks you out. And you want to get down Tombs because you want to start building Spite. Or you want to get Capes. You want to start threatening. The format is so fast. Most of the time, you should assume you will get 1 Earthquake off, and then you're going to have to start hitting with Tombs. And so you want to get down your Tombs ASAP. You want to get down your Phanpys, and the best way to do that is to go second so we can play a draw supporter. So there's a deck that wants to go second, even though it's like, oh, but you evolve. Who cares? It doesn't matter. Let them take a prize on their second turn. We don't care. We're going to come up. We're going to hit them in the mouth. We want to go second. Going second also helps against stuff like Centiskorch. It makes it surprisingly awkward for them to knock out a Donphan if they can't get the Flare Starter off. Like, they have to hit quite a bit. They have to hit the turn 1 attach. They have to hit a Welder the next turn for 2 and attach and VMAX. And so it's a little difficult for them. So going second's nice for that matchup. Electrify is also stopped, which puts Pikarom in an incredibly difficult situation. If they can't electrify. And going second to get single prizes is cool because we can actually KO with Jirachis with Spiritomb very, very, very effectively. And the way we do that is we build Spite, bench another Spiritomb, build Spite, use Jynx to move up a damage counter, and then we have 2 damage counters on it, so we're hitting for 70 damage. So against Baby Blounds or Decigoons or, whatever, a deck that plays Jirachi, going second means we can take the first prize, which is quite nice. So yeah, those are kind of the big matchups. Most of them follow about the same flow chart. It's that late game, managing your damage counters, knowing what damage you can hit, that makes this deck really, really, really fun. So I'd highly suggest giving it a shot. Like I said, I think it's incredibly fun. It's fairly good. In a no ADP format, I actually think it's quite good. In an ADP format, you have to kind of accept that you lose to ADP. But you do get the benefit of people won't be teching for single prizers in an ADP format because they're not quite as good. So you're less likely to run into like a Wondrous Labyrinth or a random Malolana or something like that. So let me know if you like the deck, want to check it out. I just do it. don't even let me know. But let me know if you enjoy it after you try it. You should 100% try it. I think this is one of the most fun decks that I've played this entire format by far. So anyway, like, comment, subscribe, other YouTube stuff. Thank you all so much for the support. I really appreciate it. And I will catch you all for a Players Cup date on Thursday. Peace out.